and I am Taylor Stevens, and Barbara Hatch is with me, and Ben Goldberg is running the tech. And why don't we go ahead and start off with when and where were you when you decided to volunteer to be inducted into your service?
Well, I was from Bisbee. My hometown then was Bisbee, Arizona, where I was born and raised, and went through high school there. At the completion of my high school, which was in 1942, my graduation, I, of course, like everybody else in my class, knew that foxholes were in our future. So there was a bid going to find the service or choose the service that you really wanted. And I went through that. I went through that effort and chose the Navy, but I was then told that they closed the enlistments, and Navy, if I wanted to go into the Navy, I'd have to commit myself for 6 years. So being 18 years old, being among the first 18, 19-year-olds for the draft, I checked with my draft board, and my draft board told me that I would be inducted around August of 1943, but I went ahead and volunteered to set up the induction, where I entered February 10th, 1943.
All right.
Just charge forward.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, there's a lot of emotions I remember. I recall very vividly when I went in. I had perhaps 50 other people from the Bisbee area went in with me on that day. A Greyhound bus picked up the Douglas new recruits and then drove to Bisbee and picked us up outside of the Lyric Theater in Bisbee. It was sort of a difficult time. For the first time, I realized, and I think that my people that were inducted with me, that this was serious, and we were going to go to war. And more importantly, I guess, the people that came down to wave goodbye to us felt the same way. And instead of the rah-rah that everyone had been exposed to, there was some handkerchiefs to the eyes, and it was a solemn affair. And as we pulled out, heading for Phoenix, where we were going to formally be inducted, there was quiet. The Greyhound bus was quite quiet, and people were quite reserved. And when we arrived in Phoenix, we were placed in the St. Carlos Hotel downtown, and we were told the night was ours, and we could do what we wanted as long as we were there for roll call the next day. And the next day, of course, we reported to the Lures building, downtown Phoenix, and at that point took our oath of office, or I should say that our oath for the Army, and that went off without a hitch. We were then taken to the train, the Southern Pacific train at the depot in Phoenix, where we had to sit and wait. The Phoenix contingent was meeting us there, And of course they had their gathering and their goodbye ceremony was held there. We all watched that. Ironically, a fellow by the name of Vay Brenner was one of those Phoenix inductees, and he was, and his parents were all saying goodbye, and his girlfriend, he had a very attractive girl friend, which she, of course, was brought to the attention of everybody on our coach anyway. And finally, it felt so good to hear that whistle blow, and we pulled out, and Vay Brenner came and sat next to me on there, and I got to know him quite well. You want me to continue then? Okay, well, we went to Fort MacArthur. Fort MacArthur was at San Pedro, California. And while there, of course, it was a big induction station. And there's all kinds of activity there. You have to remember, as I said earlier, emotions flow through this. And my emotion, I came across things that I never encountered in my life. And one of the first things was the latrines. And there was just a line of toilets, and there's no privacy whatsoever there. The shower was, everybody in the building could go get a shower. And that, of course, being raised in a family which modesty was supreme, was a very difficult thing for me to encounter. My first amusement came on the first roll call. The first morning we appeared as members of the armed forces. We were aroused around 4:30 in the morning, as I recall. Being February, it's sort of chilly. You could see your breath as you talked. And the sergeant, Ruffle, first sergeant, got out and was going to call the roll. And we were instructed that when our names were called, we were to answer by giving our address. And that would confirm, they were able to check their records. Yes, that's the guy, that must be the right guy. So they were going down the roll, and they came to my name, and they said Orland E. Freeman. Well, that chilled me, because I've never liked the name Orlando, and I was sort of embarrassed, but I replied 539 Tombstone Canyon, Bisbee, Arizona, and the formation broke out in laughter. And of course, I mistook that. I thought they were laughing at Orlando, and they were laughing at 539 Tombstone Canyon, which of course was new to them as an odd address. We were at Fort MacArthur a few days. Of course, you go through all kinds of stuff there. You get your uniform, you get a physical, and eventually you get assigned to a unit. But most importantly, you get a couple of passes, and weekend passes. And at that time, I remember, as raw recruits as we looked like, we dressed up. I had a few friends with me from Bisbee still with me. And we went to the canteen. My goodness, I can't think of the first name of that. But anyway, that was where all the movie stars, only enlisted personnel were allowed in the canteen. And Stage Door Canteen, I guess that's it. And so, again, from a guy from Bisbee, Arizona, I danced with Rita Hayworth, and I was a lousy dancer, but I just couldn't let that opportunity go by. But there was all kinds of movie stars there. Uh, and of course, Bob Hope, and there's several bands that were very famous at the time, and I felt gifted that I had that opportunity. I was finally not advised to go to my new unit, which was at Riverside, California, Camp Hahn,Haan. Camp Hahn was a artillery outfit. It was 40 millimeters anti-aircraft units, battalions there, and as I trained there in the anti-aircraft unit. While at Camp Hahn, something of significance happened, other than watching KP and all these things again, opening your eyes as to what the Army was really like. But I had a friend whose name I cannot recall now, but he wanted to take a bugler's class to be our bugler. And so they sent him down on a Saturday morning to bugle school. And he later on told me what he had seen at that time. And the bugler school was, as I said, just near the main gate. And just before they were started to happen, March Air Force Base, of course, was located right across the road. And this person saw this huge plane coming over and making a roar. And the plane was a Liberator, which is one of the big bombers. And it clipped off the two telephone poles on either side of the main gate. And my friend said he will never forget that he looked up at the Liberator and saw the bombardier, this plane could be, looking out the window, and they crashed, and of course all were killed. Well, that caused all kinds of commotion, but 10 minutes later, another Liberator takes off, March Air Force Base, and it sputters and spouts and so forth, and it crash lands in the just outside of the main hospital there, the parade grounds. Two were saved, as I recall. A soldier actually went in and pulled one of those two out, and he was awarded the Soldier's Medal for that. And then about 15 minutes later, a P-38 took off and came right over our area, much too low, and crashed in the field beyond us. Of course, that put March Air Force Base under martial law, and eventually found out that, of course, it was a mixture of fuel that caused the crash of those airplanes. At the point, the only one reason I'm telling you this is because at one point I was thinking seriously of going into the Air Force, and that sort of dissuaded me at the time, and much to my sorrow later. But anyway, at Camp Hahn, my unit went to Camp Irwin. I think now it's called Fort Irwin. It's about 37 miles northeast of Barstow, California. It was in the height of summer, and we thought we were living in real misery in Riverside and Camp Hahn, but gee, that was tremendous luxury because we went all the way down the line. We went first to tents, no floors. then to pup tents, and then maneuvering out and hardly any sleep at all. That was tough, and the maneuvers were very, very tough. At that point, I decided maybe I did want to get into the Air Force, and I asked my mother to send me some references which they required. My mother wasn't a bit interested in doing that, but I persisted. I had a real reason. I was prompted because this outfit, the 547th, turned out to be a miserable, I'll be candid, a miserable outfit. It was filled with, the officers were having at it with each other, and it had formed with National Guard officers and some out of Texas A&M military school. About half of the soldiers in it were unable to speak English, and they were from Texas, and it was not pleasant to be in there. I was promoted to a corporal, and subsequently to a sergeant, line sergeant, because they placed me in the intelligence section in the headquarters of this unit, of this battalion. It's called an S2 sergeant, and what you did primarily was get intelligence for the battle coming up, and sometimes that meant going over the enemy lines, and so it wasn't a healthy situation. So I thought, damn it, I think I'll go in the Air Force. And so I took my test, my mental test and my physical, and applied. And as soon as I did, I was sort of in the dark house because my officers that were over me didn't care for that at all. They thought I was disloyal. But I did, they left me off. Now, in the meantime, the unit went from Camp Irwin to Needles, California, for more maneuvers. We did that because none of our gunners could hit the sleeve target. They just couldn't hit it. So we had a remedial course, and where they sent us to, of course, Camp Ibis, outside of Needles, to hopefully teach these guys how to shoot a gun, or at least a cannon. And so again, we went through more maneuvers. And finally, of course, I was I got my orders to go in the Air Force to cadet training. But my unit put me in, they didn't want me anymore because I was disloyal, so they put me in a replacement depot in Needles. And I stayed there for 2 months. Well, I stayed there for a month, and then I went into San Bernardino for a month. And no one asked me to go into the Air Force. And finally, I made a few inquiries myself, and I kept getting turned down, and they said, well, we'll look into it. And they did finally, after 2 months, and they found out that I had been ordered to Wichita Falls, Texas, to enter cadet program. I had been listed as AWL in that unit, and fortunately I was able to that cleared up in time for them to tell me that they didn't want any more cadets. So they recommended I go to the infantry, and or I could go back to my old unit. My old unit was in the port of embarkation on the East Coast, headed for England. I knew I couldn't go back there because I had been disloyal. So I said, well, give me whatever you have. And Army and their wise handling of things sent me to become a medic at Abilene, Texas. And I went through training to become a medic, which was terribly frustrating for me because I'd already had the diamond eyes of flying a P-38 or something, and this was dull duty. Well, I was there for about 2 months, and then a whole unit there was sent to Camp Beale in California. That was the replacement depot to send people overseas. And so I thought I was going overseas as a medic, but then all of a sudden they said, everyone from this unit is going in the infantry as